think I lost everything? No, you just gave me permission to destroy you.
Strap yourself in, because what unfolded that night wasn't ordinary office drama or the petty squabbles of corporate politics. No, what happened bordered on apocalyptic, an implosion so spectacular it left scorch marks across the very foundation of the company I helped build. For 7 grueling years, Richardson Tech wasn't just my workplace. It was my second home, my proving ground, and in many ways my personal creation. I was the one who crafted the company's entire digital nervous system. The security layers, the server architecture, the routing protocols, the compliance infrastructure, all of it bore my fingerprints. Every late-night line of code, every bleary-eyed morning debugging session, every system audit that kept regulators pacified, that was me. I carried this company's technological skeleton on my back, piece by piece, until it could stand tall enough to call itself an industry contender. And it wasn't just a job, it was family. Marcus Richardson, the founder and CEO, wasn't just the man signing my checks. He was my father-in-law. I foolishly believed that marrying his daughter Emma meant I was part of something permanent, protected, enduring. That, being bound by blood, or at least by law, would give me a stake that no quarterly downturn or power struggle could touch. Turns out, when money and power are in the equation, family bonds dissolve faster than sugar in boiling water. The annual Christmas party was Marcus's favorite theater of control, and this one was no different. Held in the grand ballroom of a hotel that probably charged more per night than some employees made in a week, it reeked of curated extravagance. The room was a spectacle. Artificial snow pumped endlessly from hidden machines so that no one had to bother with actual December weather. A 20-foot Douglas fir, dragged halfway across the continent for the occasion, stood like a monument to excess, and a crystal chandelier glittered overhead, dangling like the sword of Damocles over the heads of 200 people, too dazzled or too scared to question the absurdity. Marcus thrived in this setting. This was his Colosseum, and we were his audience. He relished playing the part of benevolent emperor, doling out gifts, raises, and promotions like an Ivy League Santa Claus, with a taste for drama and control. Emma looked breathtaking that night in her silver cocktail dress, the fabric catching the light every time she moved. She was laughing with her sister Katie by the dessert station, the glow of the twinkling lights framing them like they were stars of the evening. Katie, ever the showboat, threw her head back when she laughed, loud, theatrical, desperate to be seen. It was less a laugh and more a performance, as though she were constantly auditioning for some rom-com scene nobody had written yet. They were both nearing 30, but in that moment, giggling together, they seemed like teenagers discovering their charm for the first time. Then Marcus took the stage. His deep, commanding voice rolled over the room like thunder, demanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed as a jazz quartet dimmed their playing into silence, "tonight we celebrate another record-breaking year." The words echoed against the ballroom walls while a projector behind him displayed the Richardson Tech logo, decked out in festive red and green. Subtlety had never been part of Marcus's vocabulary. I clenched my glass tighter because I knew what was coming. That record-breaking year was built on my designs, my middleware, my systems architecture, my compliance frameworks. The hours I poured into this company would make a banker blush. My sacrifice bought this success, and here he was, standing at the helm, taking a bow for work he didn't understand and could never have executed. His voice could sell glaciers to penguins, and the crowd adored him for it. Then came the main performance. Katie was called to the stage, and Marcus unleashed his syrup-coated speech about family values. That phrase, family values, was his favorite shield and weapon. To him, it meant nothing more than being born into his bloodline and smiling pretty for the cameras. Katie ascended to the spotlight with a squeal so piercing it nearly cracked glass. She actually skipped, toward Marcus, as though she'd been handed a ticket to the prom of her dreams. The crowd erupted in applause, flashes from cameras exploding in every direction. Phones rose above heads to record the moment for Instagram and corporate newsletters alike. Katie opened the ribbon-wrap box with all the flair of a Broadway actress, gasping loudly at the sleek BMW key fob inside. The performance was flawless. Never mind the truth, that she'd been behind the wheel of luxury cars since she was 16. To the crowd, this was a story of merit rewarded. A hardworking young executive praised for her innovative thinking, promoted to vice president of marketing strategy. I almost choked on my drink. VP of marketing strategy. Katie, who had spent the last 6 months littering LinkedIn with motivational quotes and calling it market research. Katie, who thought pivot was a basketball move and synergy was a trendy exercise class. Yet here she was, elevated to senior leadership because she shared Marcus's DNA. Confetti cannons exploded like fireworks, showering the room with silver and gold. Streamers clung to tuxedos and dresses, landing in drinks and desserts. A piece shaped like a star floated down into my whiskey sour. I plucked it out and flicked it to the floor, where it joined thousands of others carpeting the marble in a glittering display of corporate theater. Across the ballroom, Emma's eyes found mine. She gave me that look, the one that was equal parts warning and plea. Don't ruin this moment. Don't embarrass me. Be happy for Katie. I raised my glass in a mock toast, forcing a smile. Because what else could I do? Stand up and announce that this record year was the direct result of my bloodshot eyes and empty coffee cups? Should I have unrolled my resume, recited the patents filed under my name, and reminded the crowd that Richardson Tech's technological backbone wouldn't exist without me? That's when Marcus looked at me, really looked at me. His smile curved slowly, spreading with the precision of oil slicking across water. It was carnivory, cold, calculated. And in that moment, I felt a chill settle into my gut, sharper than the Arctic air blasting from the overworked vents above. But wait, Marcus said, his tone slipping into the false charm of a game show host. There's one more gift to give tonight. The entire crowd turned their attention toward me. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the servers, balancing silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, froze like statues sensing danger. The shift was palpable. 200 people collectively holding their breath, hungry for drama. Marcus raised a bag in his hand. Not a sleek ribbon-wrapped box like Katie's, but a plain shopping bag from a luxury retailer. The contrast was deliberate, and everyone saw it. "Come on up here, son," he called, his voice dripping with just enough mockery to make the word son cut through me like a blade. The walk to the stage felt endless, like moving through molasses. Whispers buzzed in the air around me, fragments of pity and anticipation. Poor guy. Finally! Saw it coming. Half the room knew exactly what was happening before I did, which should have been my first warning sign. This wasn't spontaneous. This spectacle had been rehearsed. When I reached the stage, Marcus extended the bag with a flourish. From the back of the room, it might have looked generous. Up close, it felt like a loaded weapon placed in my hands. "Go on," he urged, his smile never faltering, his eyes glinting with cruel delight. 200 pairs of eyes pressed in closer, eager, expectant, savoring the scene. They weren't watching a celebration. They were witnessing an execution dressed in glitter and champagne. Inside the bag, I found a crisp $2 bill resting neatly on top of black cotton folded with near-military precision. My hands moved slowly, almost ceremonially, as I lifted the shirt free and shook it loose. The fabric unfurled like a banner, revealing stark white block letters that screamed across the chest as though painted in neon. Recently unemployed. For a fraction of a second, the room went silent. And then it hit. The laughter started in the back corner, small and sharp, before rippling forward like a tidal wave gathering speed. It rolled across marble floors and ricocheted off crystal chandeliers, each echo growing louder, crueler, more merciless. It was the kind of laughter that feeds on itself, building into something monstrous. Even the jazz quartet faltered, their instruments lowering as they watched the unfolding spectacle, unwilling to soundtrack this grotesque corporate comedy show. The sound was unbearable, but Emma's laugh cut the deepest. Not because it was the loudest, though it certainly carried, but because of what came next. She reached out, patted me on the chest like one might reward a dog for a trick, and smiled wide enough for 20 nearby people to see. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping amusement. "You should have seen your face." That broke something inside me. 200 sets of eyes picked me apart like vultures circling a carcass, dissecting every twitch of my expression. Their laughter wasn't just noise. It was shattering glass, cutting sharp, lodging deep. Marcus stood on stage, his smile spreading with the calm triumph of a chess master who'd orchestrated this finale months in advance. Katie giggled behind her hand, clutching her new car keys as though the joke was just another punchline in her perfect evening. The smart move, the expected move, would have been to play along, toss out some quip, shrug it off, make a self-deprecating joke about finally having time for fishing, or how Emma wouldn't be able to complain about me working late anymore. Turn humiliation into crowd-pleasing humor, give them what they wanted, and limp away with whatever scraps of dignity were left. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I folded the shirt with the same careful precision Marcus's assistants had probably used to stage this entire farce. I placed it back into the bag, closed the top slowly, and drew in a breath that burned like swallowing glass shards. "Thank you," I said. My voice carried just enough for the whole room to hear. Calm, even, sincere, almost too sincere. "This is exactly what I needed." The laughter stumbled. It didn't die completely, but it faltered, tripped on itself, confused. Marcus's smile flickered just for a second, like a faulty light switch sputtering in the dark, because my gratitude wasn't part of his script. He had planned for rage, humiliation, maybe tears. He hadn't planned for me to thank him. I turned and walked away, each step deliberate, the sound of my shoes striking marble louder than the applause for Katie had been. On the way out, I passed familiar faces frozen in awkward half gestures. Jin Park caught my eye and mouthed a quiet, "Sorry," and I believed him. His expression carried actual regret. Daniel Pike, the CFO, raised his champagne glass in mock salute as if toasting my funeral. Sarah Knox from HR suddenly became fascinated with her clipboard, flipping through papers that didn't matter, avoiding my eyes like guilt itself. The valet station was blessedly quiet. A young kid, maybe 19, barely old enough to rent the tuxedo he was wearing, looked at me nervously as though afraid of being caught in a crossfire he didn't understand. "Sir," he asked, shifting awkwardly on polished shoes. "The gray sedan," I told him, handing over my ticket. "Take your time." Behind me, the ballroom's roar resumed, swelling with new laughter, new conversations, new manufactured cheer. No one followed me, not Emma. She was too busy soaking in congratulations for her sister's promotion, sliding comfortably into her role as dutiful corporate wife. No one checked on me, no one asked questions. My downfall had already been swallowed by the party, digested by the machine of Richardson Tech's endless pageantry. But as I waited for my keys to jingle into my palm, something unexpected happened. I started smiling. It wasn't forced. It wasn't bitter. It was the kind of smile that comes when you know something the rest of the world doesn't. Because they thought this was the end of my story. They thought their public execution had buried me. What they couldn't possibly realize was that this was only the opening act. What Marcus Richardson was about to learn, what all of them were about to learn, was that their disposable son-in-law had been preparing his own endgame for a long, long time. For 18 months, I'd been quietly filing patents under my own name. Every submission was perfectly legal, perfectly documented, handled by the same intellectual property firm that managed Richardson's work. They kept clients sealed in separate silos to prevent conflicts of interest. Ironically, that very structure made my independence invisible. They had no clue about North Star Systems, the modest LLC I had registered in a forgotten part of town. From the outside, it looked like a failing startup, just a brick building with peeling paint, cracked asphalt in the parking lot, weeds pushing stubbornly through broken concrete. A flickering streetlight buzzed outside like it hadn't been replaced since the Clinton years. But behind those tired walls lived servers humming with quiet intensity, machinery that contained enough digital dynamite to gut Richardson Tech from the inside out. They didn't know about the back doors, what I called eliminate switches, that I had embedded in every mission-critical system. They looked like standard administrative pathways, the kind of thing any IT team would glance at and dismiss. But they were more than that. They were my insurance policy, hidden levers that gave me control if the company ever tried to cut me loose. Most importantly, they didn't know about the federal logistics contract, the golden prize Marcus flaunted as proof of Richardson Tech's rise into government contracting royalty. That contract depended entirely on my compliance audit engine, a system they were only borrowing on a temporary license. A license set to expire at midnight on December 31st. Unless Richardson met a series of strict payment and security requirements they had been casually ignoring for 6 months, the entire deal would collapse under its own weight. I had documented every violation with the precision of a lawyer building a case. That night, as I steered my sedan toward the shabby brick building I now thought of as headquarters, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The glow of streetlights smeared across my windshield. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from the party. Daniel Pike sending a martini emoji paired with a crying, laughing face. Sarah Knox's attempt at sympathy with a thinking of you message, and prayer hands, junior engineers sending variations of dude, brutal, or sorry, man. I silenced them all with one button press. Because I didn't need sympathy now. Where were these people when Marcus staged my public downfall? Where were they when I was being humiliated in front of 200 witnesses, their eyes locked on me, their mouths sealed shut? They were too worried about their own positions, their own survival, to speak up. Fine, let them laugh. Let them believe I was finished. By the time I was done, they would learn the truth. Marcus Richardson hadn't buried me that night. He had only given me the stage to prepare his ruin. At exactly midnight, I clicked send on the license termination email I'd been perfecting for months. Every word chosen for maximum legal impact and minimum emotional satisfaction. The subject line was beautifully bland. Notice of license termination due to covenant breach. Somewhere across the city, Marcus's phone was lighting up with automated alerts from systems he probably didn't even know existed. Security protocols failing, database connections timing out, the compliance audit engine that kept his precious federal contract valid going dark like someone had pulled the plug on his corporate life support. Miguel Santos from TechVantage Labs had been quietly recruiting me for months with offers that would make grown men weep. His text came through at 12:01 a.m. Weather looks clear. Our old college code phrase meaning all signatures were in place, legal documents filed, chess pieces positioned for checkmate. The beauty of being underestimated is that it gives you room to maneuver. While Marcus was busy playing CEO and Emma was shopping for designer handbags, I'd been building something they didn't even know existed. Something clean, something legal, something that would make tonight's party trick look like amateur hour. The next morning felt like Christmas, and the Super Bowl rolled into one beautiful, career-destroying package. Bloomberg ran breaking news before most people had their coffee. Richardson Tech facing compliance crisis following sudden software license revocations. Their stock was halted pending investigation into what federal officials described as potential non-compliance with security protocols required for government contracts. But wait, it got better. Harper Reid's investigative piece on Daniel Pike ran that same morning, front page of the business section. She'd been circling Daniel like a shark that smelled blood but couldn't locate the source. The documentation package I'd provided her was Christmas morning for investigative journalists. Travel expenses that would make Saudi princes blush. Vendor contracts with shell companies existing only on paper. Email chains showing Daniel pressuring suppliers into marketing rebates that looked suspiciously like kickbacks when you actually did the math. My personal favorite was his daughter's private school tuition being written off as executive education expenses, because apparently advanced finger painting at Manhattan Prep Academy was crucial to Richardson's corporate strategy. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced a preliminary inquiry within hours. Martha Stewart went to prison for less. My phone exploded with panic texts from the Richardson corporate family. Jin Park, emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Systems degrading. Marcus screaming at IT about turning things off and on again. Some random engineer. Everything's falling apart. Half the servers throwing error messages. Database connections failing. Even Sarah from HR. Marcus screaming, Daniel sweating bullets, Katie locked in her office crying. Katie crying. The same Katie who'd squealed with delight over her unearned BMW was now realizing that jokes have consequences when you're dealing with someone who knows where all the digital bodies are buried. Emma finally texted around noon. What did you do? I stared at her message for 10 minutes, typing and deleting responses. Everything from detailed explanations of patent law to simple statements about what happens when you treat talent like it's disposable and assume loyalty means stupidity. I went with the truth. I stopped letting people laugh while standing on my work. Marcus called at exactly noon because apparently, even in the middle of corporate meltdowns, the man still believed in power lunch timing. His voice had that dangerous quiet quality rich people use when they're trying not to scream at the help in public. You come here now, he said, not bothering with pleasantries or basic human decency. Just a direct command from the lord of the manor to his rebellious peasant. No, I said, and the silence that followed was so complete I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting. But I'll meet you in the lobby in an hour. Bring your lawyer. The lobby meeting was absolutely beautiful. Priya Patel, my intellectual property lawyer, arrived looking like the kind of attorney who charged $400 an hour and earned every penny through pure competence and calculated ruthlessness. She carried documentation that could end Marcus's career and probably his legacy. Marcus showed up with his own legal team, 3 guys in identical suits who looked like they'd been cloned in some corporate law laboratory. Behind them shuffled Daniel Pike, looking like a man who'd spent the morning getting acquainted with federal investigators and their pointed questions about creative accounting practices. This is what's going to happen, Marcus started, trying to project authority that worked on board members and government contractors. You're going to undo whatever technical tantrum you threw last night. We'll pretend this never happened, and maybe we'll discuss bringing you back at reduced salary. Reduced salary. His entire company was circling the drain, Federal investigators were probably setting up camp in his CFO's office, and he was still trying to negotiate from a position of strength he absolutely didn't have. Counteroffer, I said, opening Priya's folder and laying out documents like dealing cards in a poker game where I held all the aces. Patent applications, license agreements, payment default notices, security breach reports I'd been filing for months while they ignored every recommendation, cease and desist orders that had already been served. The paper trail was so complete, it could have been used as evidence in business school about how not to manage intellectual property relationships. Marcus's face went through about 15 different colors before settling on a shade of pale that matched the marble floors, where his employees had laughed at my humiliation just 18 hours earlier. That's when Katie stumbled in, mascara smudged like she'd been crying for hours, looking like a kid who'd just learned that actions have consequences in the real world. "Can't you just make this go away?" she pleaded, and the desperation in her voice was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. "Make what go away, Katie? The patents I filed legally? The contracts your father breached systematically? The federal investigation into Daniel's creative bookkeeping? Or just the fact that your family thought you could humiliate me in front of 200 people and I'd keep building your empire for free?" Emma appeared behind them like a ghost at her own funeral, still wearing that silver dress from the party, because apparently crisis management didn't require costume changes. Her arms were folded across her chest in that defensive posture she used when she knew she was wrong, but wasn't ready to admit it. "We're family," Marcus tried one more time, like magic words that would undo 18 months of careful legal preparation and documented covenant breaches. "No," I said, standing up from the marble bench where they'd probably imagined I'd beg for forgiveness and promise to make their problems disappear. "We're not. Family doesn't hand out unemployment notices as party favors. Family doesn't laugh while you destroy someone's career for entertainment." I walked toward the exit while they stood there in their expensive clothes and inherited power, finally understanding that some bridges can't be rebuilt after you've burned them yourself with corporate napalm and public humiliation. Tech Vantage Labs turned out to be everything Richardson Tech pretended to be. Actual innovation instead of inherited mediocrity. Real teamwork instead of nepotistic circle idiots where qualifications mattered less than DNA. Leadership that understood the difference between taking credit and earning it through actual work instead of executive vision and strategic alignment. Miguel gave me a corner office with windows that actually opened, a development team that didn't need their hands held every 5 minutes, and the kind of budget that made Richardson's penny pinching look like exactly what it was: rich people being cheap with other people's talent. My first hire was Jin Park because loyalty deserves to be rewarded when it actually goes both directions. I offered him a signing bonus that was more than Richardson had given him in annual raises over 3 years, plus equity in projects he'd actually be building instead of just maintaining while executives took credit. Jin took one look at the offer sheet and started laughing. The good kind of laughter, not the cruel kind I'd been subjected to at Marcus's party. "You know they're calling you Lucifer over there," Jin told me during his first week. "Sarah from HR keeps talking about how you betrayed the family trust." Family trust. Right. Because trusting your family not to publicly humiliate you was apparently too much to ask, but expecting you to keep building their empire after they treated you like garbage was just natural family dynamics. We started a helpline for smaller vendors who'd been getting squeezed by Daniel's kickback schemes, companies forced to choose between paying bribes disguised as marketing fees or losing their Richardson contracts entirely. Turned out there were a lot of them, and they all had stories about Daniel's creative interpretation of ethical business practices. 1 year later, I was hosting my own Christmas party in the Tech Vantage Lab, and the difference a year makes when you're surrounded by people who actually deserve to be there was absolutely incredible. Miguel brought his grandmother's tamale recipe, not some catered nonsense from a company that charged by the fancy napkin. Jen had somehow managed to rig the coffee machine to dispense hot chocolate because apparently being a networking genius also made you a beverage wizard. Priya showed up with champagne that cost more than most people's car payments. And Harper Reed brought her journalism award because she was genuinely proud of it and wanted to share the moment with people who'd helped make it possible. Even Mrs. Rossi from my apartment building's cafe had joined us, carrying a tray of her legendary cannoli and complaining in thick Brooklyn accent about how we were all too skinny. That's when the breaking news alert cut through our conversation like a knife through wrapping paper. Richardson Tech to be acquired in distress sale following year-long compliance crisis and federal investigation. Stock down 73% from pre-crisis highs. The room went quiet except for server hums and Miguel's barely suppressed snort of laughter. On screen, they were showing file footage of the Richardson building. Same glass tower where I'd spent 7 years building other people's dreams while they planned my destruction. Catastrophic dependency on revoked intellectual property licenses, the anchor was saying, reading from notes like delivering someone's obituary. Regulatory penalties have frozen the company's federal contracting pipeline, while ongoing SEC investigations into financial irregularities have spooked investors and triggered multiple shareholder lawsuits. My phone buzzed with a group text to the old Richardson family thread I'd forgotten to leave because, honestly, I'd been too busy succeeding to remember they existed. Marcus had written, "Turn on the news." I pictured them sitting in that marble atrium where they'd laughed at my expense 12 months ago. Same floor now, reflecting gray faces as they watched their empire get sold off piece by piece to pay for Marcus's mistakes and Daniel's legal fees. Same chandelier that had sparkled above their cruel laughter now lighting up their corporate funeral. The tiny $2 bill sat framed on my desk, Marcus's joke gift that had become my favorite reminder of exactly how much I was worth to people who thought net worth was the only worth that mattered. That wrinkled piece of legal tender had watched me build something real, something mine, something nobody could take away with a gift bag and a smirk. Miguel raised his champagne in a toast that felt nothing like Daniel Pike's mocking gesture from that awful night. To building things that last. Everyone clinked glasses while TV analysts dissected Richardson's collapse with surgical precision. Harper was grinning like she just won the lottery. You know what the best part is? They're using your patents as case studies in business schools now. How to protect intellectual property in corporate partnerships. You're literally teaching the next generation how not to get screwed, Mrs. Rossi patted my shoulder with flour-dusted hands and said something in Italian that definitely translated to, "Good for you, kid." She'd never understood exactly what I did for a living, but she understood the difference between people who worked for what they had and people who just expected it to be handed to them. I didn't need their applause anymore. Didn't need Marcus's approval or Emma's validation or Katie's fake friendship. I had something infinitely better. A team that respected my work, a future I'd built with my own hands, and the satisfaction of knowing they'd finally learned what value actually looks like.